The house sat quietly on the edge of coastal New England, the last survivor of a dead academic district. The university had shuttered its nearby campus 15 years earlier, and the only sound left was the tide murmuring somewhere beyond the fog. The structure itself seemed to exhale salt and mildew books stacked in its windows like barricades against time. Nathan Cole arrived with a single duffel bag and a box of his Uncle Emery's correspondence. The will had come as a surprise. He hadn't seen the man since his teenage years. Emery Cole had been a folklorist, one of those out-of-era academics who still believed forgotten places held the real substance of culture. "Maps lie," he'd once told Nathan. "They tell you where man has been, not where he's afraid to look." His uncle's study occupied the top floor under the sagging roofline. Dust lay over everything: cabinets of field notes, stacks of reel-to-reel tapes, and folders labeled in fading pen. Cranberry Marsh Luminations, The Disappearing River, Headquarters of Wind. Each folder held hundreds of typed pages. But Nathan noticed patterns: repeated references to silent cartography, and locations excluded by consent. He turned the wall lamp toward the desk. There, half buried under old magazines and fossil samples, lay a single object that didn't belong: a thick, leather-bound volume mottled with mold and soot. Its cover, nearly black, carried an embossed title barely visible under grime: The Atlas of Abandoned Wonders. The binding was heavier than any book he had ever lifted, its pages fused by residue of time and humidity. Under the lamplight, he could see precise but erratic handwriting across the ivory paper, a mixture of printed text and thin human notation swirling through the margins. There was no publication date, no cataloging stamp, no author. Smudged coordinates in deep ink annotated several entries, describing places that officially didn't exist. A town struck from census after a chemical spill no one remembered, a bridge photographed on maps but missing in person, and a desert settlement said to drift 1 mile each decade. Nathan's curiosity ignited like an inheritance he hadn't wanted but couldn't refuse. He filmed a small segment for his online archive, a quiet channel focused on obscure scholarship and forgotten curiosities. The footage showed his hand brushing the title clear, his voice calmly describing the strange unlisted text. He uploaded the clip that night, titling it An Atlas That Forgot the World. By morning, the video views had already surpassed everything else on his channel. The comment section brimmed with fascination: questions, coordinates, speculations, and folklore threads. But amid the excitement came stranger replies, claims that the background of this footage shifted between frames, as though the shelves behind him rearranged themselves, or that a figure flickered behind his left shoulder for a single second. Nathan checked. The frames were identical. Still, the digital grain carried a pulse that hadn't been there before, like breathing hidden inside the pixels. Days blurred. Every evening, Nathan cataloged a few more entries, scanning the fragile paper into digital form. One coordinate began to dominate his focus, not for what was written, but for how little it revealed. The entry carried a delicate heading: Erosion, Kansas. The description was only a single sentence long: population itself. The words sat apart from the rest, written in faint red ink as if from another age. There was no town of erosion listed anywhere in Kansas or the surrounding states. The coordinates intersected a nameless patch of farmland miles from any highway. Along the margin, in his uncle's precise script, a single note curved around the edge of the paper: The air moves backward there. Listen before you name it. He laughed at the phrase, but it nested uncomfortably beneath his ribs. The next morning, he printed the satellite map anyway, slid it into his jacket pocket, and packed his camera gear. The air smelled of coastal fog as he locked the house behind him, securing it as if he expected it to reopen on its own. Following one coordinate, he said into the camera, not expecting much. Maybe a forgotten settlement, a dot between counties that vanished off record. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly against the steering wheel. By dusk, he had driven 3 states west, the coastal mist giving way to a dry prairie horizon. Asphalt bled into gravel, gravel into dust. When he stopped for fuel, locals frowned at the mention of erosion. A gas clerk finally muttered, "Ain't no town by that name." But after a storm, the ground hums south of the wheat silos. Folks don't linger there. Nathan pressed on. The GPS signal thinned, the sky turned bronze, and static began to breathe through the recorder's audio track. Somewhere ahead, half lost in distance, a cluster of rooftops shimmered and then vanished again into the plain. The dirt road narrowed until it was only a suggestion under his wheels. The printed coordinates matched perfectly with the far horizon, where faint shapes soon appeared, fragile in the twilight haze. He cut the engine. The silence landed like weight. The air quivered warm, heavy, tasting faintly metallic, as if the earth had recently swallowed rainfall, rich in iron. He walked forward through the tall grass, following the faint outline of what might have been a main street. The town faded and reappeared with each step, optical illusion or heatwave trickery. When it solidified, he saw 3 narrow streets forming a perfect grid, roughly 20 structures sagging inward toward the center. The nearest sign half buried, reed erosion. Its white paint cracked and flaked, the surface worn smooth like driftwood. He started recording again. The first building was a shop front missing its door, the smell of flour still clinging to the air. Shelves leaned under the weight of desiccated sacks whose labels had aged into a gray blur. Above them, a ceiling fan rotated slowly, though no electricity hummed anywhere. The movement was steady, indecipherable air that turned itself. He moved to the next building. A small post office kept eerily tidy under its blanket of dust. A stack of mail sat on the counter. Pulling one envelope free, Nathan froze. It was addressed to Nathan Cole, the erosion postmaster. There was no sender. When he tried to open it, the paper dissolved between his fingers, leaving only a curl of red wax stamped with the word "Welcome." Then came the tremor. It didn't feel geological. It felt alive, like a slow exhalation rising through the ground. The recorder spiked in volume, the monitor filling with erratic waves. Beneath the wind, there were voices or something arranged like voices repeating syllables in mechanical time, reshaping air. He followed the resonance to a stone fountain standing dry in what passed for a town square. Figures carved into the rim leaned inwards, mouths parted in song. Kneeling beside one, Nathan felt vibration travel through his bones, perfectly synchronized with his heartbeat, until it became unclear which belonged to him. "Structure intact," he whispered to the camera. Vibration increasing with sunset. Possible underground cavity. He stopped mid-sentence. The air reversed direction. The breeze that should have brushed past instead pulled sharply inward toward the fountain basin, dragging grit and dust down its throat. The entire landscape seemed to bend with it. The horizon shifted closer, the buildings imperceptibly leaning toward the square. Nathan stumbled back. Metallic odor intensifying, he spoke quickly into the recorder. Peripheral distortion on all sides. Updating observations. The audio cut to static, then a piercing feedback tone forced him to drop the device. Dust lifted, not upward, but outward. Suspended in thin spirals that took on shape hollow faces forming, dissolving. Among them he heard the phrase again, distant but deliberate. "Listen before you name it." Adrenaline overtook reason. Nathan ran for the car. The street stretched too long, variables of distance folding and collapsing with each stride. Above him, the clouds pulsed faintly, their light dimming as though turned inside out. He reached the car just as night devoured the remaining color. The air folded into silence. He drove hard, headlights slicing a maze of identical turns until recognizably broken fence posts returned and vanished again. Twice he passed his own tire marks. The third time the engine died. He waited in the stillness. Time felt paused, uncertain. Only when dawn rimmed the field's silver did the illusion break. The land stood flat, the sky plain, no town, no fountain, only the solitary loop of tire tracks behind him. The camera still blinked red, battery untouched. When he replayed it, the last frame displayed an image of himself standing within Erosion Square. Face calm, light rising from the ground around him. Months later, an archivist cataloging Emery Cole's estate uncovered a USB drive taped to the inside cover of the Atlas of Abandoned Wonders. It contained a single corrupted file labeled erosion_real_final. MP4. Most of it was noise. At 4 minutes, the picture snapped into focus. The fountain dust circling backward, and Nathan's whisper, nearly serene. "If you find this place, don't write it down." The footage ended. The archivist noticed the atlas lying open on the table beside him, a faint chemical scent in the air. Across the last page, fresh red ink had appeared. Erosion, Kansas population, itself. Last observed by N. Cole. Below that, identical handwriting added something new, coordinates corresponding precisely to the room where he sat. He stared at them as a sheet of paper lifted on its own and settled again, rustling like breath. The monitor froze on a field of static. In the quiet that followed, he thought he heard the drag of turning pages somewhere behind him. The ink on the book gleamed faintly, as if still wet, spelling a final line. Current observer present. The light above his desk flickered twice, dust lingering mid-air. The whisper came once more, soft as wind through paper. "Listen before you name it." Every page of the surrounding archives fluttered once, simultaneously, then fell still. When all sound stopped, the atlas shut itself with a muffled thud. The camera caught one last image, dust ascending in a single breath, the red spine of the book gleaming faintly in the lamplight. For the span of a heartbeat, it almost looked like the pulse of something alive beneath the leather. Then the picture went black, leaving only the faint rhythm of paper turning somewhere off-screen, slow and steady, until it too vanished into silence. And afterward, only quiet endless, waiting and listening.